Hello, boys. Welcome to White Pill Media. I'm Dr. Infinity. This week, I'm going to be talking about the comic series League of Extraordinary Gentlemen by Alan Moore. If you're hoping to come across a well-edited, well-researched, a good review, I don't know what type of reviews you guys usually go for, but you're not going to find that on this channel. On this channel, it's more like
Go apple! Go orange! Go banana!
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's, if you ever look up best comics to read and shit, one, those lists fucking suck. It's the same comics over and over and over again. It's terrible, and most of the comics aren't even very good on there. This is basically Alan Moore took a bunch of Victorian, or I guess just British, I guess maybe Victorian age, novels and fictional characters, and it's what if they were real? And he's put them together and they're in this story. This video is going to be a review. I'm going to break down what I hate. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to talk about dark realism and what I would call postmodern toxic masculinity, or the type of quote-unquote toxic masculinity that in Alan Moore trying to defeat traditional masculinity and other people like him, they create this new form of toxic masculinity, which I would say is actual toxic masculinity. That's more towards the end. This is more of a midwits take on it, so keep that in mind. I don't know why, if you're an Alan Moore fan, you're here. Maybe you were curious. Well, what's he going to say? What can he do against Alan Moore? It's going to be spoilers for everything going in. I read the whole series, except for, I think there's a spin-off with Captain Nemo's daughter, which I'm not going to read. I hated, what I read, everything else, so I'm not going to bother. And I'm just going to go volume by volume. And then, I'm probably going to go off on a lot of tangents throughout the video. So it's going to be very disconnected. So good luck, I guess. Anyways, I'm going to get right into volume 1, so this is a video more for if you've read the series. If you haven't read the series, I wouldn't really recommend it. I think the first 2 volumes are all right. There are some weaknesses there, but it just falls off a fucking cliff right after that and gets really bad. Wilhelmina Murray, she's tasked by the British government to start collecting, kind of not superheroes, but more supernatural, larger-than-life figures to form a team together. So so that's her task. She goes to go find Mr. Quarterman, who I guess is Alan Quarterman, and he seems to be, I didn't know who this was, but he seems to be kind of typical, I guess, pulp hero, I guess, where he's an explorer and everything. And we start in 1898, so that's just kind of what he does. She goes to Egypt to find him because Quarterman's an opium addict and just kind of useless. And she's almost raped, and it happens really quick. Some of the sexual stuff, and I'll get more into it as we go, but I'm not the type of guy that says you can't have sexual assault or rape or whatever in a medium. I think you can, but I think it should be portrayed in a certain way, you know what I mean? Not as a cheap plot device. And here, really early on, it feels very much like a cheap plot device. We have that. We have Captain Nemo. I think I do want to read that sometime. Was it 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? I think there are a few books in that series. I want to do that. So basically, they're forming a little team and they're going around. They end up going to Paris and they run into this guy Dupont. And I've heard that name before. I think I've read a story because it was Edgar Allan Poe, and he's a French Sherlock Holmes, or a French detective. And in there, they're on the hunt for someone that is raping and brutalizing prostitutes in France. And this turns out to be Jekyll and Hyde. And Jekyll and Hyde is just another problem I have with the series overall is just you have too many irredeemable characters, too many characters that have just done too much fucked up shit to ever be redeemed. We have, they recruit Jekyll and Hyde to the team, but it's canon that Mr. Hyde has raped and killed a lot of women, so he might go on to save people later on. That doesn't wipe away the people that he's killed. It doesn't. And I think that's a problem in more modern times with having characters that are too quote-unquote morally gray. I wouldn't even call this morally gray because when he turns into the monster form, he's still intelligent. He might have lower impulse control, but he's still intelligent. He's still in control of his body. So it doesn't really work for me. You can't really redeem that. You can't really move past that. And we also have the mysterious Mr. M who's putting the team together. And it's like, there's some cool stuff. It's like kind of just kind of a basic intro. And it's like, all right, I don't really like Hyde, right? I think Hyde goes too far, but he's not nearly as bad as Griffin. And I'm about to talk about Griffin. So they also have a report about some kind of holy ghost at this school, and that 3 young girls have been raped and impregnated at this school. It turns out that this is the Invisible Man, and they go there to stay the night at this school, and it turns out the ghost is attacking again, and the ghost is raping another girl, right? And there's no other like term for it. You know what I mean? Like, again, these are all underage girls, and we have at least like 3 that have been raped and impregnated, probably more. And the panels just feel a little exploitive, like they're a little too sexualized. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, rape is bad, but it feels like, like he's just making it like taboo. So they end up recruiting Griffin, which I think is insane. Like, no one is shouting that we should not be working with a serial rapist who shows no remorse for their crimes. There's no like real self-reflection from the team. Like, there's no Mina, who's the only woman on the team, but I think the men would also be upset as well. But there's none of that. There's some good stuff as well. Like, where, they're doing like little character building stuff. So it's like, it's going okay, but then it's like, you're also, it's like the team's going okay. And then it's like, oh, by the way, here's Griffin. And it's like, he's clearly a fucking villain. He's clearly a fucking villain. How exactly are you supposed to keep track of him? Because couldn't he just walk away at any point? Like, he's going to get a pardon and some money. But it's like, he's just too dangerous. He's just too dangerous. So it doesn't make sense that they allow Griffin to join their team. I think it's insane, right? It just doesn't work. It's like you have a Suicide Squad, basically, but you don't have any restraints. There's nothing, right? There's nothing to stop them. So the scene with like Griffin and the school, it reminded me a bit of another one of Alan Moore's comics, Lost Girls. I'm going to talk about that in a bit, but that one I also really don't like, and I don't think that gets like enough exposure. Turns out that they've been recruited by the mysterious Mr. M is actually Moriarty from James Bond, and I'm like, oh, not from James Bond, I'm sorry, from Sherlock Holmes. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I've read some Sherlock Holmes. I know a little bit about it, so I'm like, that's neat. Turns out Griffin also later, he went out to go spy and find out who they're working for, and he ends up killing a police officer. So that's great. Griffin's a great guy to have around. Basically, there's like this kind of huge city-wide war between Moriarty and this guy called the Doctor, who's like this Chinese guy, and he can do like sorcery or something. I have no fucking clue who the Doctor is. I assume it's a reference to some character, some homage. A pretty like standard volume 1 with like, the Moriarty gets launched off into space, they save London, and that's just kind of it. It's pretty like standard, and if you cut out like Hyde and Griffin, I could appreciate it more. Like, you need people to root for, you need people to be interested in, and I can't take an interest in these 2 characters because they're too fucked up as villains. They are irredeemable. It's not like they are a little gray and they have some problems, but no, they're a lot worse than that. They're very much like worse than a lot of the villains we see, and I don't think that's, yeah. Also, there's more of just like literary writing at the end. I didn't read it. I think it was called Alan in the Sundered Veil. Didn't check it out. Another kind of problem that I had with Volume 1 and just the whole series overall, it's just Alan Moore. I think this is just kind of sophomoric, which is just taking a lot of literary references and you just put them in your work, and it's like, look how smart I am. But you're taking a bunch of characters from other authors, like famous people, and you're just like, what if I just subverted them? What if I just made them perverted and depressed and drug addicts and whatever, just like more like Alan Moore. And you take all these characters and you make them more like Alan Moore. You paint them in Alan Moore's colors, and then they don't really resemble their original characters whatsoever. Because I saw the Invisible Man movie. I never read the book, but it's just like, he was like a sociopath and he was kind of crazy, but he wasn't a serial rapist, I don't think the original author had that in mind when he wrote The Invisible Man, but that's where Alan Moore went. with that power. Or like Hyde, I don't think Jekyll and Hyde, at least I don't believe he was like a big monster man that just like raped and killed women. I don't think so. Quarterman, I don't think he's like an opium addict or whatever. Or Nemo, I think that might be on point actually. I think he is supposed to be like just kind of a crazy intelligent guy that has the submarine. So that might be on point actually. You've just taken all these characters and you've just like broken them and twisted them into what you want to the point where they don't resemble the things they're supposed to be homages to. So what's the point? Why not create something new if you're not gonna keep them who they are? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're just changed too much. Next volume, we have this Mars section, which reminded me of Lawrence of Arabia. I'm pretty sure it's a homage to Lawrence of Arabia. And then the Martians show up because it's War of the Worlds. And it's like, this is like kind of interesting. This is like kind of cool, you know, an alien invasion during Victorian England. That's kind of neat. Of course, we have Griffin attacking Mina because Griffin has betrayed them to the aliens. And it's like, wow, who could have seen that coming, that we really couldn't put our trust or faith in this fucking psycho? And some of the characters talk about disliking Griffin or not trusting him, but I think you should have a more severe reaction to that type of guy, you know what I mean? And they don't. They just don't. It's like, no shit, this happens. I'm glad Mina wasn't raped, at least. I was kind of worried because this is an Alan Moore book, but hey, we have more coming up. Hyde ends up catching Griffin, who he can see when he goes invisible, and he ends up raping him to death. And it's nice. It's a good scene. It's like, yeah. It's just good, man. It's just great stuff. Raped him to death. You know, that's a new one. It almost feels like Alan Moore and like I'll get into this later, but it's almost like childish. Like it's like that comic book series Invincible by Kirkman. Terrible comic. Really dislike it. Very bad writing. But it's like that where you can have characters commit the most horrific, awful crimes, but you know it's just they can just be whoosh, wipe the slate totally clean, forgiven for everything. It's just it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and it's like, yeah, Hyde is still a piece of shit, even though like he got revenge on Griffin in a really horrible way. But that doesn't excuse all the women he killed in France, right? It doesn't. It never will. We have Dr. Moreau here. It reminds, oh yeah, I ended up seeing a bit of that movie. It had like Val Kilmer in it, and it had Marlon Brando. And Marlon Brando was really big in that movie. He was really big. That's okay. I kind of like the little animal people, but it's just like on the way to it, you have Quarterman and Mina, who are now a couple. They're just like, I don't know. It just feels a little childish with like some of the sex stuff he has on them, has them do. And everything is just like, I don't know. No, they go to Moreau and they end up getting a disease bomb. They use this on the Martians. We have Hyde killed, you know, trying to buy them time. Nemo ends up leaving during this time. Mina also goes off and leaves Alan all by himself. And it's like, yeah, Alan Moore is just taking these characters and turning them into like dark and like gloomy, and they're just perverted versions of themselves, right? And it's something I really dislike because it's not better. It's not like quote unquote more adult just to take something and to subvert it and break it down for the consumers out there. And you know, for the consumers out there, the best way I can explain it is if the original authors who wrote these works are good god Iluvatar or whatever in Lord of the Rings, and then Alan Moore would be like Morgoth or Sauron. So if you're a consumer, you will understand that reference, okay? You got it? And by the end of this volume, you've killed off most of the main cast, or they've gone away, right? We're down 2 characters. Not that I gave a shit about them, but they're gone. Anyway, this is where it really kind of drops off a cliff for me, and it's just kind of insane. But the next volume of the series is Black Dossier, where we're just dropped in London in 1958. We're in the world of 1984. We have no fucking clue what's happening. And because we still have Alan and we still have Mina, but they're just young all of a sudden, and we have no idea what the fuck is happening. We have no fucking clue, right? And it's like in this world, Big Brother has just died. I don't know. We also have a parody of James Bond, who's a attempted rapist because, of Of course he is, and of course Alan Moore hates James Bond. I will get into that later. The Life of Orlando, which is just this poorly added thing where it's just this massive info dump because we're just explaining this character that we haven't met and we don't know from the first 2 volumes, and Alan Moore's just going to fill us in with this shit. They apparently met Orlando in Tibet. We also have if you remember the book 1984, it's very good, but they also talk about how the government in that world creates pornography and uses that to control the population. Kind of interesting. I'm sure you could make some comparisons to, well, whatever. But Alan Moore has created a porn comic called Porn Sec, and it just feels silly. It just feels kind of silly, and I didn't really like it. I think there's more like literary stuff or just stories where I did not read Fairies Fortunes Founded, and the Fanny Hill thing just seemed like more porn, and I really didn't need that from Alan Moore. Alan and Mina have stolen this thing called the Black Dossier, which is like a report of agents like them, and they're stealing it just to have this information, I guess, to prevent the government from having it, even though I don't know. They need it for something. I'm sorry, it's been a few weeks since I've read it. I have some notes, but I'm just kind of glancing between them right now. So they're trying to get it, and people for the government, including James Bond, are trying to steal it back. We also have this huge info dump at the boarding school explaining the guy that took over the government now, and it's I don't really give a shit. They're being chased around. We have a meeting with this. I looked it up. It was apparently a children's book series back then, and there's this black doll thing. I'm sure it's going to make someone uncomfortable, but it fit for its time period, so we're just going to leave it at that. And it also has some Dutch girls dolls, and it's just Alan Moore has taken these children's book characters and he's made them into they do drugs and they have sex, and it's just of course Alan Moore looks and sees some children's book characters and it's how can I make this perverted? How can I make this perverted, right? Honestly, if you took Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, and, you had Piglet tell Pooh to eat his ass and call it honey, that's not clever. That's not intelligent. It's just, hey, I corrupted this thing, because it's really easy to corrupt things. It's very difficult to make good things that people would want to look at and cherish. You know what I mean? Parody is very easy. In Black Dossier, our characters just aren't doing very much. We have Alan and we have Mina, and then later on we get Orlando at the end, and the Blazing World is just trippy fourth dimension shit where it's basically fucking Imagination Land. From South Park, it's basically fucking that. Mina, Alan, and Orlando are they're a couple, and it's a little weird because Orlando, I know I'm going to piss someone off and I'm probably not describing it right, but Orlando can change from having male genitalia to female genitalia. They just change. Every once in a while they go back and forth. I don't know if you'd say that's transsexual or whatever, but it's magic, and it's this weird thing. I kind of want to talk about Alan Moore's personal life because I felt this was him projecting a little bit. So if you didn't know, Alan Moore has been married twice. He was first married to Phyllis Moore, and they were married for 15 years. Alan Moore and his wife Phyllis, they actually had a live-in mutual lover named Debbie Delano, and it's just kind of interesting. There's more comparisons to make later on, but Debbie ended up running away with Phyllis, and Alan Moore later got married to a woman named Melinda. Yes, Melinda. And Melinda was the main illustrator for Lost Girls. That relationship feels a little like Alan Moore, and we'll talk about it more later, where I think it kind of links up a bit. It's a little projection from him. But I just want to know if you like the first 2 volumes of League, and I thought they were okay-ish. There's definitely stuff I would cut. How the fuck did we get here? How the fuck did we get from Moriarty and War of the Worlds to this? Just how the hell did we get here? And it's no one's going to tell Alan Moore, hey man, maybe we should edit some of this, or hey dude, I don't know, but it's just messy. It's just messy and shitty. The next volume is called Century, and now we are back in 1910. We know that there's a murderer on the loose, and there's also something called a moonchild. Nemo's daughter has run off to London, and it makes zero sense for this girl who's like really rich and wealthy because she doesn't want to follow in her father's footsteps. There's a lot of other shit she could do, but she's run off to clean chamber pots in like shithole London. And of course this happens where she is gang raped, and she's 15 years old. I looked it up on the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Wikipedia. She was born in 1895. It's 1910, so she's 15 years old when she's gang raped. And it's awesome. It's really cool. It's really just fucking sweet that this happens, because the night before, she's asked by some of Nemo's older crew if she wants to like become captain, and she says no. But that night, oh boy, it's really convenient. She gets raped, and then the next morning, she is now a like badass pirate queen. You know, it's like rape is like a experience. You know, it's like experience points in a video game, and it's not. It's a shattering event. You know, it's not character building. It's not character development to be abused. It's shattering, right? And I'll say again, I'm not the type of guy that says you can never have that, because unfortunately shit like that happens in real life and whatever. But it shouldn't be you were raped? Now you can be A, badass pirate queen, B, girl boss, C, high-powered executive, you know? Or it's just, that's not how that works. And it feels really shitty and stupid. And yeah, the next morning she calls in like the Nautilus, the submarine, to attack London. I'm sure some innocent people were killed as well. But rape is not character development. I'm going to say that, you know, you can trust Dr. Infinity when he tells you rape is not character development. Got it? We also have 2 new members of the League to replace Griffin and Hyde. I don't know what their fucking names are. They're just humans, and they're forgotten right away, and I didn't even write their names down. So I couldn't tell you if I wanted to. I have no fucking clue what their names were. And now we're jumping to 1969. There's like this Moonchild shit. We still have like this weird relationship going on with like Alan and Mina and Orlando. And it feels like, it's just Alan, where it's just like two, like just a man and woman together. It's like, oh no, that we can't have that. That's too vanilla. It's so boring, mate. It's so fucking boring. You know, it's like Alan Moore has something against just, a nice British man, a nice British woman together. You know, we can't have that. We can't have that. We also have this really classy sex scene where these characters are talking to each other. And, you know, of course, there has to be sex, because otherwise, you know, these words would be so boring, right? How could we get through this scene without sex? And it's sort of like comparing HBO's Rome. It's like I, Claudius. And Rome is just, there's some okay stuff in there, but it's just sleazy and just kind of lower brow. But I, Claudius is great. And I think they handle a lot of similar material to Rome, but it's done so much better and so much more mature. And it doesn't have to just be sex, sex, sex in your face to be mature and good. You know what I mean? And there's this guy, Oliver Howdo, who's jumping bodies and wants to end the world. I don't really care about that. We're just kind of like walking around and shit. And it's just like, here's a sex scene, here's a drug trip. And at the concert thing, we have Mina getting molested by a guy, because why not? You know, it's been a little too long since the 15-year-old was gang raped, so we have to have something new, right? We jump into 1977, where Alan is back to being a junkie, and Mina's gone, and, you know, we don't know what the fuck's going on. I think there's a reference to Susie and the Banshees. I believe there's a reference to it. Then we jump to 2009. It turns out Orlando, who's this immortal warrior person, I guess person is a fine way to describe them, has been to like Iraq, and and they've like slaughtered civilians, and it's never brought up again. But, you know, they've definitely killed a lot of innocent people, but we'll never touch on that again. And Orlando is more like Poochie from The Simpsons, or Jar Jar Binks. You're just supposed to love them, right? You're just supposed to love them. They're just great at everything they do, and they might have some quote-unquote flaws, but they really don't. Everyone just likes them, and they're just really good at everything they attempt. It's just stupid. I really hate this character. I thought they're just fucking terrible, right? Because Alan Moore has a hate boner for James Bond because he's like a man, he's attractive, he loves his country, and, he sleeps with beautiful women. He doesn't rape anyone. So Alan Moore has a lot of bones to pick with James Bond. But Orlando, who is similar in some ways to James Bond, but a lot more degenerate and just kind of a worse character overall. This is what Alan Moore likes, right? This is good. James Bond is bad. Anyways, we're in 2009, and Orlando is now looking for all the others. We have Knight, who was from Black Dossier. She is the new M. Alan is homeless, and he's just found instantly on the street. He is found fucking instantly on the street by Orlando. It's too easy. It's just like insane how fucking easy and simple that was to find one of the two characters we're looking for. And another problem I have is just I don't care about the characters at this point. There's no build up to them. It's just spectacles, right? Mina was getting some development in the first 2 volumes. Alan was getting some development in the first 2 volumes. And then we went through Dossier, we went through Century, and all that. And here we are. And it's like, I don't fucking really know them. They just seem to be doing like a lot of drugs, a lot of like, isn't this great that we're in this like threesome thing? And that's like it. They're not really characters to me. There's just no buildup. I don't give a shit. And if I don't care about our characters, I don't care overall about anything. Mina is also in a mental hospital, so that's great. Oh, by the way, we have Harry Potter is the Antichrist. Thank you, Alan Moore. Harry Potter is the Antichrist. That's great. Harry Potter also committed a school shooting, so that's wonderful at Hogwarts. And they're doing battle against him. It's like the world is supposed to be ending, the world is at stake. But I don't care what happens. I really don't give a shit what's going to happen here. And then Harry Potter ends up shooting a lightning bolt out of his penis. I'm not making that up. I'll post it. But he shoots a lightning bolt out of his penis, and he kills Alan with it. And of course, of the 3 characters that can get killed, of course it's Alan. And this is where I'm going to talk about Alan Moore's personal life and some projection a little bit. I kind of feel like here's Alan Moore. He's in this threesome thing in real life, and then his wife and their lover end up running away together and leaving Alan Moore behind. And in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, what happens? We have this threesome couple, and then Alan gets killed, and the 2 women get to run off with each other. And it's like, is there some projection there? Am I reaching? Probably. But Mary Poppins shows up, and it's like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't really give a fuck. I really don't care. And like villains are killed, characters are killed, Alan's dead. And it's like, whatever. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't interest me. All of this stuff that's happening, it's just a spectacle. I don't care. Because characters are story. And if we don't care about them and their journeys, we have nothing. And we have nothing in League. There's nothing to go on. Tempest. Let's round it up. This is going to be a long fucking video. James Bond is this ugly old man in a wheelchair, and he's hunting these 3 beautiful women because they got Knight into the magic pool that they went into to become immortal. So it's these 3 hot women, that are like have new progressive views. And James Bond, he's the new big bad because the most evil character in, I guess, British literature is James Bond's to Alan Moore. Of course he hates James Bond, because, he didn't rape anyone, because it's not Lost Girls and it's not, children. Of course James Bond is like the new villain, and it's just Alan Moore. It just feels like this little nerd guy in the corner that's pissed off that people like, the attractive guy that's like just nice to people, and he like takes care of things, and he's confident, and he's traditionally masculine. And Alan Moore fucking hates that and wants to destroy and humiliate that image, and it's just, it feels very pathetic when you're reading this book. Because I haven't seen every James Bond movie, but I don't think there's like any rape in it. I don't think James Bond rapes anyone. I don't think there's a bunch of degenerate sex shit in it. The few James Bond movies I've seen, I've enjoyed. I think they're just fun. Right? It's like adventure stories, basically. In The Tempest, it's revealed that, there's like 3 storylines going on all at once. And it's like, I can't be asked to like keep track of them all because they're not very fucking interesting. But it turns out that like superheroes are propaganda. Alan Moore calls them fascist. He compares them to Birth of a Nation, which is that was made by this guy that was in the Ku Klux Klan. You know, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, get over yourself, Moore. Get over yourself. James Bond also nukes the blazing world. He just blows up Imagination Land, you know. So I guess we can say this, like Alan Moore's actually based in Red Pilled because James Bond still gets to save the world. I was wrong about Alan Moore. I would like to apologize right now about Alan Moore. I'm sorry. James Bond still gets to save the world. He's still a hero. We have a little thing with a spy school. And of course, you know, we have implied rape with an adult and a minor. It's this girl getting the Russian flu. And it's like, it reminds me of this, like the Griffin and the boarding school. It all ties into where I can't take this at like Alan Moore's not doing anything too perverted with this. Because if you look up Lost Girls, I don't really recommend reading it because it's like just really nasty shit. But if you go on Goodreads and look up Lost Girls and go to some of the 1-star reviews, they talk about it. But basically in that, it's like it's Wendy, it's Dorothy, and it's Alice, and it's just other like childlike characters, and it's other very young characters. They're children, and it's just this degenerate sex shit and drugs. And I was reading some of it, and I started to skim it because I'm like, this is really perverted and just like fucked up. Part where I stopped reading, where it's like Peter Pan coming through a window, and then here's Wendy, and it's like they're doing some stuff, and then here's Wendy's younger brothers, and it's like Peter Pan's doing some stuff with them, and it's like, I'm fucking done. This is some really nasty shit and probably borderline illegal, if not illegal. I don't know what you would call it. You know, comment down below if you know, but how would you describe an adult performing sexual acts with a child? I don't know. What word would we use for that? Alan Moore's fans love him. You know, I think if Alan Moore just came out and said, by the way, I'm like a TERF or whatever, or his fan base would annihilate him. They would go fucking ballistic. But Alan Moore produces Lost Girls, and you just have a bunch of suits and bugmen jerking him off and telling him how fucking great he is. But this is just like this thing, the Griffin thing, and just like some other weird shit in his works makes me think the worst of him. I'll also point this out because we have Knight, who isn't much of a character, but she is running around with Orlando and they're doing stuff. They end up having sex the night, and I'm like, every single character that Orlando has wanted to sleep with ends up sleeping with Orlando. Like, they are a Mary Sue. You know what I mean? Nothing ever goes bad for them because they're not really a character. I think they're just a vehicle for Alan Moore to go, look how cool they are. And I'm like, this is far worse than James Bond. As much as James Bond is like a power fantasy for men, it's like, what the fuck would you call this? But I don't think he's self-aware. He's just not self-aware. He's not introspective about it. Blazing World is alive. There's more like 3D garbage, like Prospero is evil or something, and they're doing something with the world. And it's like, I don't really give a shit about all this stuff happening because I don't care about our people. They're just all terrible people. I'll talk about, more dark realism in a little bit once I get through it. It turns out that years ago, when they go to the moon, that Mina had used the sperm of Moriarty, which is really smart. That's really smart to use sperm from a supervillain to create a warmongering race that's just going around killing shit. And they're like basically living on the space station on the moon now, you know, but like the whole universe or like galaxies like in the shit right now. And James Bond gets killed. He doesn't land a single blow, and it's like, Alan Moore really just wants to humiliate this dude. And it's like, good for you, I guess. And they're just living in immortal space forever. And that's it. That's how the series ends, you know, and it's just, holy shit. You know, you're just drowning in references. It's just crowded. It's just fucking crowded in here. I would just say, like, overall for the series, I fucking hated it. I think we had some okay stuff early on. I still think Griffin and Hyde either need to be drastically rewritten or just remove them and pick some other characters to go along with because they just don't work because they're too villainous. They're just too villainous. They don't work. But the first two volumes are, like, all right, and then it's just completely, we dropped the fucking ball. We just dropped the fucking ball here. and we never pick it up again. To add to the tempest, like every few pages we're in a completely different style, timeline, and story, and it's just so jarring. It's just so all over the place, and it's just, yeah, I don't want to bother keeping track of it. I really just didn't care for it, didn't like it. Now, in this section of the video, I'm going to talk about more dark realism and what I would call like postmodern toxic masculinity. What does all that mean? So first off, I'm going to start with dark realism. So I think League is another example of dark realism. And dark realism is just everyone is an asshole or worse. Everyone is selfish, perverted, and everything is subverted. There's nothing good. There are no good people. And if anyone is actually good or tries to do the right thing, well, they're an idiot and they get killed. And it's as unrealistic as everyone is super nice and friendly and nothing ever bad happens. It's stupid and I hate it. You know, it's like the Witcher series. That's another book series I fucking hate. I don't like George R.R. Martin or Game of Thrones. Not really. That's another example of what I would call dark realism. Joe Abercrombie, too. First Law is terrible. You're not like breaking down stereotypes that have been set up where it's like here's goodness and virtue. You're just creating new stereotypes where everyone is weak and pathetic and horny. Like all of the men are terrible, and it's just there can never be anything happy. Nothing can ever go well. I hate all those books, and I hate just like that trend. I think you can have like darker shit happen. It doesn't have to be like everyone's actually perfect and good. You can have complicated characters, but they're just working so hard to make everything so ugly and pathetic and broken, you know, just like them, if you will. Like a lot of these creators, I think, are projecting onto that. And in League, it's like more is just, he just took these literary figures and they're like little toys, you know, he's just breaking them. He's just seeing how many times can he smash it in the ground and is it still recognizable? And it's like, not really. Okay, well, I'll keep going. I'll keep dropping it. And it's like, with all of the sex shit in this book, it's like Moore's constantly trying to tell you that he's not like the other guys with the perverted stuff. You know, it's like Robert E. Howard in Conan the Barbarian is bad. James Bond is bad because they objectify women. You know, these are quote-unquote toxic masculinity examples. But his objectification of women and all of his sex shit is good. It's actually progressive. It's empowering for women in his book. And it's like, bullshit. You know, I think this is worse than anything in Conan. I haven't read every Conan story. It's like, yeah, it's like big muscular dude on the cover, like woman wearing like a loincloth, you know, like maybe thrown over his shoulder. But it's not like he's raping anyone, you know, like it's so far from what I've read, you know, that doesn't happen. It feels like all of these writers, you know, in wanting to destroy traditional masculinity have just now made these pathetic men, these man children. You know, I think they're responsible in a lot of ways for creating like man children and all the problems that come with that. Just whiny, pathetic people. Alan Quarterman, who I think is just supposed to be like an explorer and a strong man, you know, and is just a leader, is in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He's weak. He's a drug addict. He's unconfident. He's led around by his penis, you know. And he's just killed off in a humiliating way at the end of the story. And that's what Alan Moore wanted. He just wanted to take this traditionally masculine person and just like James Bond and just humiliate and break them, you know. And Mina is just a boring character who has no powers. He has no personality. Orlando is, like I've said before, they're just Jar Jar Binks or Poochie, you know. No one ever says no to Orlando. They're the best. They've had such a long, great, amazing, super history. They've traveled the world and done all these great things. Aren't they just, don't you love them, dear reader? Don't you love them? They've done so many cool things. And they're like more suave than James Bond, and no one ever rejects them. And I don't know if James Bond ever like got rejected, but I don't think he like slept with every woman he saw. But I think every person that Orlando has been interested in sleeps with Orlando. I'm almost positive. I didn't keep track, but I think so. And it's just a weird power fantasy from this guy. It's just fucking weird from Alan Moore. So what you've done when you've just annihilated what just traditional masculinity, which is good, is that you've just, I think more modern men, you know, not everyone, but unfortunately like a larger chunk than I like, has been pushed into like Andrew Tate and like pickup artists and like all that other crap, and this is like actually what I would call, like, I don't really like the term toxic, but I guess you would actually call this shit toxic masculinity, because Andrew Tate's a fucking faggot, and all those people are. They're just consumerist. They objectify women and all of this shit, and the other side of and the other people over on that side are trying to sell you masculinity as a product. Like a beard oil makes you a man. Having this stupid ass car that is tens of thousands of dollars overpriced makes you a man. Owning this crappy McMansion, that makes you a man. Here's a stack of cash. I don't have any real friends or personality, but I'm a man. Young guys are, guess what? They want to be masculine. It's natural to them, but you've broken masculine. But Alan Moore and others have been like working at chipping away and subverting masculinity to the point where they're just reaching out to anyone that says it's cool to be a man. It's cool to be masculine. And unfortunately, they're like promoting this shit instead of, just like normal, good masculinity. And I don't know, like, I don't have like bullet points. I'm not trying to sell you like dick pills or anything like that, or, subscribe to my course at $300 a month and you'll be as rich as me. But like, I don't know, just like being a man, like taking responsibility, being confident, being good to women, taking care of your body because that's important. I don't know. That's just like being a decent person, but Alan Moore doesn't want that. Alan Moore doesn't want that. You shouldn't aspire to anything with Alan Moore. According to Alan Moore, you should just be getting some weird sex shit, do a lot of drugs, and then get killed in a humiliating way. That's that. Anyways, I know I just ranted and raved at several points in this video and went off on tangents, and I'm sorry about that. But yeah, there's just a lot I wanted to cover in this video. I also want to say I'm probably going to do another Welcome to the Trough video this weekend and probably a short movie review. If you don't know, Welcome to the Trough is where I talk about indie publications like anthologies and just books, and it's something I want to focus more on because I think it's better to try to promote newer voices and all that shit. So it's something I'm trying. I have some other reviews on my channel, some shit posting and all that. Yeah, that's about it. I thought the series started on shaky legs and then it fell down like 20 flights of stairs. Anyways, thanks for watching. Dr. Infinity out.